with the finance side, so I guess it was, opening in New York City is a big commitment. You've got to put a name on a leash. You've got to raise money. You've probably got to get cash flow to keep you going as you're generating sales until you're able to pay that back. So was that something that you had money yourself, or did you have to go to someone and convince them that this is a great idea? Do you want to invest in me?
Yeah. Do you want to join the Helaine train?
Yeah.
So that was the route that I had to go. I was not able to, bootstrap this myself. I was able to be a participant, but I was pretty young at the time. And I knew that I needed some capital to not only build it out, but also sustain it and fund it. And so I did. And that was probably the hardest part for me. I really hated asking people for money, even though you have to flip it on your head. And you're like, wow, you're giving people an opportunity to be along for the ride. Right. And those early people now, I'm kind of like, you got in pretty sweet, guys, including my grandma, which I'm happy to have her on the cap table. But you have to really flip it around. And that comes from confidence. And I was really young, so I was still working through that. But I did have to ask people, and you start with your friends and family. And I'm really fortunate that I had a lot of friends and family, and also all my former bosses, right? In the beginning, people are likely betting on the jockey. That's why I joke about the Helaine train. One of our early investors was like, I don't know about this rowing thing, but I'm on the Helaine train. I had another investor who came to an early class, and she asked me, do I need to wear a bathing suit? And I said, Pam, like, what do you think this is? And she's like, I thought we were having like little pools. And I was like, so you wrote me a check and you didn't even read the deck. And so I think in retrospect, like now I know that people were betting on the jockey early days, and you have to also bet on yourself.
With the raising of capital, so outside your friends and family, which I guess is I work with my family, so I guess it's a slightly different conversation than someone that's putting in, that you don't know, that's probably putting in money and they could risk losing it, and you need to sort of show them why they should do it. When you created it for your non-family people, how important was it to get the deck put together and the numbers and did you have to get some help to sort of put together a business plan that was actually made sense and you could actually deliver upon?
Matt, I want to tell you that I spent time on a deck and a model. I did not in the beginning. I really didn't. There was maybe a one-sheeter or an email, but I mean, it's a good story because it was literally a hope and a prayer. And I was also already doing it. Like, I think I talk about this a lot. You have to have a certain amount of like naivete to actually do this, right? You can't know everything. Otherwise, it's like you're jumping into waters that's full of crazy creatures. Like, you can't know what the crazy creatures are. You just have to have confidence that you're going to be able to fend them off and actually navigate those really, really dangerous waters. And so that's how I entered it. I did not have a deck day one. So we opened our first location and did that first funding round really just on the concept and on conversation. Wow. And we were really scrappy with it. I didn't raise millions of dollars. It was a couple $100,000. So it was a different game. Then, my co-founder, Ashley, joined. She's also a yin yang, right? You bring people on board that are complementary skill sets to you. She was like, well, obviously we need a deck. And she was able to whip up a deck. And so for future fundraising rounds, I like to think that we had a really strong deck with a vision of not only what we were going to do in the next, 6, 9, 12 months with that capital, but ultimately where we were going with it, both financially and also from an execution perspective.
So it sounds as though you kind of bootstrapped. You didn't raise a ton of money, and it certainly, my guess is, with the New York City rents, the pressure was on once you opened your doors to get people in and start generating cash quite quickly. How did that go? Did it go as planned? I've done a bunch of similar things. Even when I was a kid, I used to run parties in nightclubs, and you used to think you were going to have a couple of thousand people in, and then you'd have like 300 or 400, and it was like, okay, that the most difficult thing for most people is getting bums on seats and generating income. So what was that? Were you did it go well, or was that pretty tough going as well?
Early days in Studio One, it worked pretty well. I mean, especially in retrospect, we did not spend $1 on marketing. We, in retrospect, we hit the market at the right time. We crushed PR. We crushed PR to the point that we had, again, 1,500 people signed up for this thing before we even opened our doors. And we actually nurtured press really well. It was also the perfect time in the market. This is like pre-class pass. This is true boutiques. And so there truly was not enough supply for the demand, right? So we also, like, you have to understand where the market is and where supply and demand is. We hit at the perfect point. On the flip side, though, we did not learn early on how to market the business because we were in the right place at the right time, and that actually bit us in the ass for number two, because we're like, oh well, if we build it, they will come, right? Yeah. And so a lot of lessons learned, but that first location was hit the market at the right time. We had janky elevators. We had a shared bathroom on the floor with people that hated us. We had like lawsuits with the music, but the customers came. They loved it. They came back and they felt in their bodies our mission. And so that was all the fuel we needed to, one, keep going, reinvest in the business, make improvements, and also think about how we were going to grow it. But never really refined the marketing chops in that first studio because, you know, we kind of hit the market at the right time, and we had this PR arm that was really flexing.
So second location, I believe around about 2016, you'd obviously come off success. So I guess I've been there as well. I guess you kind of have this little bit of confidence. Oh, you know, world's my oyster kind of thing. I don't know whether that was your case, but how did you go into number two then? And what were some of the differences between that first and studio and the second one then?
Made all the mistakes in number two. You know, people always say the first pancake is when you really learn stuff. No, for us, it was the second pancake, because the first one wasn't a pancake. It was just a little microwave. Let's see what happens. It was a replication, essentially. So for number two, we signed a fancy retail spot, ground floor. We hired the architect behind Dry Bar because I was like, I want this to be the visual representation that we didn't do last time. We spent more money than we had. We had a $50,000 floor. Like, we made all the mistakes. I cut a 35 square foot hole in the side of a building. I learned everything there was to learn about a louver.
I don't know what that is either.
Yeah, it's basically an exhaust window that like this studio didn't have. And I was told the 11th hour we didn't have approval to cut that hole in the wall. But I also was being told by our contractor if we didn't cut the hole, we weren't opening in 2 weeks. And so I had to, like, I don't know if I broke laws, but like I had to do some crazy shit to get that studio open. And amidst it all, we did not market. Like, we did not have a budget for marketing. We didn't know. I think we did some Subway ads because that sounded cool. But we did not market it. And, you know, it really had some early success. We also then had like a pretty devastating flood 6 weeks in, which took out our studio that was just on the up and up. And so with that one, we learned a lot of hard lessons that I like to think hopefully informed some of the future studios. But number two, we learned a lot of lessons.
So with marketing, and I was at the boutique studio fitness event last week, and I met the ladies from Fitting Room who were kind of telling me they opened, I can't remember exactly what year, but probably early on, similar to yourself. And there was only a few studios in New York. Now she gave me the numbers of how many were actually open, and the penetration is about the same, but the amount of studios is huge now. So I guess you have to be really on the ball with your, you know, the costs that you're spending to acquire a client and then to be able to retain them. So what were some of the things that you shifted in terms of getting bums on seats for that second location, or things that you found to be quite effective?
Yeah, I mean, I feel fortunate in that, you know, we're talking 2016. And so we were able to spin up some digital ads. We were able to bring on some partners to help us just drive leads. And then kind of tracking the main KPIs along the customer journey to being a member, we started to really understand where we were succeeding, where we weren't. In that, okay, we were able to drive people in, but we learned that they had to come 3 times because of our modality. It's brand new, it's different. People grew up running and riding bikes. Most people have never rode before, let alone understanding our modality, which is a HIIT class with rowing. And so we learned that, you know, it can be X amount of dollars to drive a lead into the studio, but that we have to figure out how to get them in 3 times. And so a lot of testing around different intro offers. Depending on the market, we're probably still testing intro offers because we got to get them in 3 times. And then once they're in 3 times, we have a pretty healthy conversion rate to a member, and then our retention rate is really great. But we have more challenges up front, is kind of what we learned throughout this process. And it's all about building community, right? Community is what we're doing here in fitness studios. Like that's why people are going to come in versus doing something at home or on their own. They want that motivation, that accountability, the energy, and the fire of people around them. And so I think the most successful studios that we have not only cultivated a really good early adopter group, but then nurtured them to really bring their friends in and welcome in those new leads and really help grow the studio organically through community.
All right. When you'd open your second studio then, from a cash perspective, did you have to rethink the way you were funding the business, or did you go back to the existing people, or did you have to find new people? And was there any more challenges in terms of your investors with how long it took to sort of, from a marketing perspective, to get people in?
Yes. When I said I made all the mistakes with number 2, funding is definitely also in that bucket. Yes, I went to the existing investors. Some of them participated. Then it was really around networking and just trying to get to new people who could be potential investors. And this is like, we're still an angels, friends and family round now. And so it's really friends of friends, friends of friends of friends, friends of investors. I come from the tech startup world. And so I knew a lot of people that were investing in tech. And for me, the challenge was, how do I find people that understand retail? And so oftentimes it was actually passionate people. And we actually brought on board some clients. So some really passionate CITYROW clients ended up joining, which is really fun and really cool to know that these people feel it and they're going to bet behind it. But we set out to raise $750, and I think we got $400K. So we ended up like not having enough money, having to get a loan with our contractor. Like when I say all the mistakes, Matt, I mean all the mistakes. And so that second round of funding was really, really challenging and hard for a ton of reasons, because at the same time too, we still hadn't proven out number 2 yet. And so once we were building it, we were still fundraising, and it was quite the journey.